Hello everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation to come and speak to you today. Not a problem at all for me to speak about my favourite subject, which is FASD and my children generally. So really delighted that you've got an interest in this topic. As you heard already, I'm Barbara Ogston. I work for Adoption UK, worked for them for about 3.5 years. And I manage FASD Hub Scotland, who are a Scottish Government funded organisation project who support all families, adoptive biological kinship and fostering families who are affected by FASD. And I have a great little team of people there, and we do lots of amazing work, one-to-one work, lots of training, lots of things there. But I'm not really here to speak about my work, here to speak about my passion, which also happens to be my work. So just to introduce myself a wee bit more, as you heard, I'm a local. I live in Glenluce, and my husband is the Church of Scotland minister in Glenluce and in Castle Kennedy, which is Luce Valley and Inch parish churches. And we have been there for about 5.5 years. Previous to that, we were in Ballantrae, just round the corner. We'd been there for 8 years before that. We came to adoption through infertility. We knew that even before we were married, we knew we probably wouldn't be able to have biological children due to health issues. And that turned out to be the case. So we very quickly, after it being confirmed we would not be able to have biological children, we moved into adoption. We were approved for 2 children, and after a very long wait, I know that you're in the approval waiting stage at the moment. That is the hardest stage of adoption, I think, waiting for that phone call. We waited for 8 months, and we received a phone call telling us they would a potential match of a little girl. So social workers came out and told us about this little girl. We said yes, absolutely, we'll take her. And then they said, there's a baby also about to be born, a full biological sibling. Would you consider taking the baby as well? And we're like, yes, we would. However, it took a full year for our son to come to us. So our daughter came home she came home in June 2008, and our son came home in June 2009. And we're just absolutely delighted we've been able to keep these biological siblings together. Yeah, next slide please. I think that's enough about us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the experiences that children who are adopted may have faced, and Emma's mentioned a lot of these already, but just to mention briefly trauma, because that is a really big issue. And there's lots of different kinds of trauma. There's pre-birth trauma, which is very closely linked to what I'm going to be speaking to you today. So pre-birth trauma is things like domestic violence in the home before the baby was born. It affects a pregnant woman's stress levels, her hormones, and that can impact on the development of a baby. There's also pre-birth trauma such as alcohol exposure and drug exposure, and that's what I'm going to come back to. Some adoptive children also have traumatic experiences. If they are living at home with birth families, there may be abuse, there may be neglect, there may be inconsistent care. There is a lot of challenges that even very young babies can go through, and even though they may not have any physical memory of it, then that emotional memory or maybe the sensory memories of those experiences remain. And attachment, which again is something that Emma was speaking about earlier on. They may have had several carers over a short period of time. And that can lead to them finding it quite hard to attach to who is now going to be the primary caregiver. So just something it's not something I'm going to talk about a lot. But some of the things I am talking about today I know are quite emotive, and they might cause you to have thoughts or feelings that maybe be your own experiences that might be quite challenging. So I'd encourage that if you're in that situation, please make sure you speak to me or speak to somebody afterwards, because it is quite distressing, some of the things that I have to share with you and bring you all down after your lunch. I'll try and bring you all up again at the end, honestly. Okay, next slide please. So I'm here really to talk about FASD. So what is FASD? Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder can arise from alcohol exposure in pregnancy, and it affects the developing brain and body of an individual before they are born. FASD is a lifelong neurodevelopmental condition, often referred to as a hidden disability. Each person with FASD is affected differently. That's cut down from the normal definition that we would use, because I was trying to not bombard you with too much information today. But it is basically the only way that an individual can have fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is being by part of an alcohol-exposed pregnancy. And it's very much a spectrum. Everyone is affected differently, and it is known as a hidden disability. That means that you cannot tell by looking at somebody if they have the condition. I'll say a wee bit more about that in a moment. Next slide, please. So FASD affects about 3 to 5% of the population. Now that's a lot. That's a lot of people. That works out, very blue there, but it means about 1 in 20 people have FASD. Now, many of you, unless you're part of this adoption world, will never have heard of FASD. You go to the street corner, ask someone to tell you about autism, they can probably tell you something. Ask them to tell you about FASD, and chances are the first thing they'll say is, what's that? But actually, it is up to 4 to 5 times more prevalent than autism, which is really quite a startling statistic. It means in Scotland, there's about 1,500 babies a year born with FASD. In Scotland, there's about 250,000 people with FASD. Now, the number of those people that actually have a diagnosis is minuscule. And as you can tell, it is a spectrum, so there's a lot of people out there leading very high achieving, really good, really healthy, positive lives. But maybe there's just something a wee bit different about the way their brain works. And that could be FASD, that could be a result of prenatal alcohol exposure. But there are people who are much more significantly affected by prenatal alcohol exposure, and they are the ones that may get a diagnosis of FASD or may get a diagnosis of something else, depending where they live and depending what the diagnostic kind of system is like in their area. Care experienced children, young people, are up to 4 times more likely to have FASD than the general population. So that means about 20% of adopted children are likely to have FASD. I can see all your faces being shocked here. There was a research study in Peterborough in 2005 which revealed that 75% of adopted children had a history of prenatal alcohol exposure. So that doesn't mean 75% had FASD, it means 75% were at risk of FASD. So it is a massive, massive issue within the care experience community, and that's why Adoption UK are the people who are leading the support in Scotland around FASD. I mentioned about it's a hidden disability and you can't tell by looking at somebody if they have it. There are some facial features that are associated with the condition, and these are narrow eye openings, a smooth philtrum, which is this little bit here, and a thin upper lip. However, only about 10% of individuals with FASD have those facial features. So 90% you would never be able to tell by looking at them that they have FASD. Next slide, please. So these are kind of some of the common challenges. Actually, before I go into common challenges, I'll just tell you a wee bit more about FASD. So alcohol is what's known as a teratogen, and a teratogen is a substance that can cross the placenta into a fetus and can affect fetal development at any stage of the pregnancy. And because an unborn baby doesn't yet have a fully developed liver, they're not able to filter out that alcohol. So the alcohol circulates in the fetus's blood supply, and that can cause harm at any point. Alcohol is actually more damaging than drugs during pregnancy. Children who are born with neonatal abstinence syndrome, which means they've been addicted to drugs in the womb, have a very, very difficult early start in life. But generally, longer term, then they may have challenges, but they aren't as a result of the drug exposure. However, children who are exposed to alcohol prenatally, then they are the ones that are much more significantly affected long term, because it is a lifelong condition. So some of the common challenges, a lot of the common challenges take place in the frontal lobe, in the front part of our brain, which is where executive functioning takes place. And this is because the way our brain develops is the cells develop at the base of our brain, they travel up over to the front of our brain. That's how our brain develops, and that's quite a long journey, and a lot can happen on the way. Cells can get lost, damaged, go to the wrong place on the way. So executive functioning skills are a major challenge for people with FASD. That includes our planning and problem solving skills. Things like visual timetables are really helpful, but they might just need a lot of support being able to make what you would think were obvious decisions and planning their day, remembering to put on their underwear before their trousers, that kind of thing. Planning and problem is a big challenge. Impulse control can be very challenging as well, whether it's eating too much, whether it's hitting out, lashing out. Just being able to control their impulses can be challenging. Hyperactive behaviour, a large percentage, about 65% of children with FASD also have a diagnosis of ADHD. It's a different kind of ADHD, just because of the way the brain works, but it's all the kind of behaviours you'd expect with ADHD, kind of hyperactivity behaviour. They may really find social skills challenging. I would say you begin to notice this between about ages 8 and 12. I know for my own, for my son who's a diagnosis of FASD, then it was in the playground. We lived next door to the school at the time. I could actually look out and see him in the playground, and I could almost pinpoint to the day the point where his peers all moved on and he was left behind. And he turned and started playing with the primary ones. And he would still play with the primary ones if he had the opportunity to do so, but he's in 3rd year at the academy, so it's not quite so easy for him. But social skills, social interaction can be really challenging. Many individuals have challenges with sensory difficulties, so they may be sensory seekers. My boy was a sensory seeker. He, like going to school, would touch everything, touch every hedge, touch every fence. If it was snowing or raining, oh, that was just amazing. So many sensory experiences. Putting things in his mouth all the time. Getting into all really kind of messy, gunky play. Loved all that kind of thing. Some other children are sensory adverse. So things like noise might be really overwhelming for them. Certain textures of food, the labels on their clothing, all sorts of sensory challenges. Emotional regulation. I know you'll all have heard the term meltdown, and it's one we try not to use, but it's one that I know that people understand. It's that total dysregulation that comes from just being bombarded with so much, and you don't know how to deal with those emotions that you've got, and you just melt down. It might look like a tantrum, but actually it's a lot more complex than that. Sleep difficulties, very common in children with FASD as well, whether it's because they maybe don't have an internal body clock, maybe they don't realise that nighttime means sleep time, lots of kind of different reasons why they might have sleep problems. Memory is a big one as well, particularly working memory. So if I asked you what your phone number was, I would remember your phone number long enough to write it down, but ask me at dinner time what your phone number was, I wouldn't remember what it was. So that's working memory, when you have to hold information in your head for a very short space of time. That can be really challenging. And associated difficulties. So all these things that are up here are things that we notice in childhood, but associated difficulties are what we look for, or what we might experience when children, young people get older. So kind of late teenage years, early adulthood, they are more likely to have mental health difficulties, problems with substance misuse, they may become vulnerable adults, may become involved in criminal behaviour. I know I'm painting you a very bleak picture here, and I apologise for that, but I do need to be realistic with you. These are associated challenges. However, it's not all bad news, because when the right support is put in place, when a child with FASD is identified young, where they're given a diagnosis and they are in a supportive environment with people who understand their needs, then these difficulties, when they're older, are not inevitable. They can be avoided. Next one, please. I do want to share the positives of parenting a child with FASD as well, because our children are amazing. They are clever, they are funny, they are kind, they are really caring, they can have really great strengths, they can be like really artistic, really sporty, really good at any part of academic work. It's really, really important that we don't lose just sight of how amazing our children are, even though they come with such great challenges and needs at times. As I say, when the right support is put in place, when people have got a good understanding of a young person's needs, then they can do amazing things and they can achieve and go on to lead a healthy, independent, positive life. So I don't want you all to think it's all doom and gloom, because it's absolutely not. And if you met my children, then you would realise that life might be challenging at times, but they are wonderful, happy, just loving children. So every September is International FASD Awareness Month, and in September 2021, FASD Hub Scotland produced a video, a little animation, and we worked with parents and carers and people with FASD to develop this animation, and actually went on to win an award. It won a Waterloo Foundation Embracing Complexity Award 2021, and I'm hoping we might be able to show you it. It's just about 5 minutes long.
It's really early in the morning. Mum and Dad are still asleep, but because of my FASD, my brain is always busy, and I'm already wide awake. Mum and Dad have made a planner for my day. I find it easier if I know what's happening and when. 8 o'clock means breakfast. Jam on toast is my favourite. I love the crunchy feeling of the burnt toast between my teeth. Mum and Dad know all about FASD. So does my auntie. She's having a baby. She isn't drinking any alcohol while pregnant, making sure my new cousin is as safe as possible. Doctors now know that it is not safe to drink alcohol at any time when pregnant. Mum says it's not always been that way. Lots of people still don't realise how dangerous alcohol can be to an unborn baby. Secondary school is a lot different to primary. Instead of one classroom, I've got 7 in one day. There are so many more people to get to know and things to remember. I hope everyone likes me. Sometimes it's too much at once. I feel much better now. Today I get to tell my class about FASD and why I think differently about the world around me. It's not just me, it could be as many as 1 in 20 people. It's more common than autism and ADHD. People need to think differently like I do. When people with FASD like me are supported by family, professionals and friends like you, then we can achieve great things. I like giving presentations and talking, though I'm not always so confident with maths. It sometimes helps to work things out in a different way. Thanks, Juliet. After school, I visit my friends at our FASD community group. We all have FASD, but we're each unique. Alfie and I love adventures. We like the way going high on the swing makes us feel all wizzy. Anna is very kind to animals. Sometimes she needs a reminder to be gentle. Alyssa is really musical. She loves the vibrations of the drum. Sometimes she plays too loud for me, but that's okay. I like dancing. After seeing my friends, I am starving. Hurry up, Dad. 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 Dad, I'm hungry. After a long day, I'm tired and my brain feels all fuzzy. But my family understands that my brain works differently. They know how to help me. I play my baby cousin a lullaby before bed. I can't wait to meet her. I have strengths and talents, and there is lots more to me than my FASD. But my FASD can often make life tricky, confusing and frustrating when those around me don't understand why I think differently. When they think differently, life is much easier. My FASD makes me, me.
So I hope that kind of gives you a little insight into, there's a lot of challenges out there, but there's some strengths as well. And I am incredibly proud of that animation because it was my son who did the voiceover for it. And so if you notice a little Stranraer twang, then that's why. And he makes it sound seamless. But the amount of work that went into him being able to do that was incredible. It was a case of the whole script was written out with spacing in between the words depending how long a space he had to leave. There was arrows that went up when he had to put his voice up, and the whole thing is 40 different bits strung together into one audio. But it sounds seamless. I can assure you it definitely is not when you hear the raw footage. So I'm incredibly proud of that. I know I've given you a lot of really quite difficult, maybe even depressing information there about FASD. But I do have to be realistic. It is a major issue, not just in adoption, but across the whole of society. And it's not something that just focuses on any particular social class. It's really prevalent among kind of middle-aged women, middle-class women who maybe have a really high-powered executive job, come home for a drink of wine with their dinner every night, don't realise they're pregnant till they're 8 weeks. It goes across all generations, all social classes, everything. And also we're very careful about the language that we use when we talk about this because I know there's a lot of stigma around FASD. So you might have heard me say things like a baby was part of an alcohol-exposed pregnancy. I wouldn't say it's a result of a woman drinking because we would say that it's the alcohol that's the agent of change. It's not a woman's behaviour. No woman is to blame for FASD. No women's behaviours lead to FASD. We say women drink alcohol during pregnancy for one of 3 reasons. She either doesn't know she's pregnant, she doesn't know that drinking alcohol during pregnancy is dangerous, or she doesn't know how to stop drinking alcohol. Maybe there's a situation around her that she's not able to stop. So it's never a woman's fault. Alcohol is the agent of change, not a woman's behaviour. But I just wanted to finish just by sharing with you a little bit more about our own experience. My son was diagnosed as a baby when he was 4 months old, which is incredibly rare and wouldn't actually happen nowadays. But because he has facial features, then it made diagnosis much easier. So we knew that he had FASD when we adopted him, but as we already had his biological sister, it was a no-brainer. We're going to take him. And it's been an experience. I'll say that, and I'm not going to go into lots of details about him. Because he is a local boy. But what I will share with you is how our church responded to having both our children in their congregation. When we moved to Ballantrae from Glasgow, we only had our daughter, and the church just totally embraced her. They totally loved her, and they knew she was adopted, didn't see her as being anything different. When our son came along 6 months after we moved to Ballantrae, again the same happened. The church embraced him, but it was different. Our son, and neither of our children, but in particular our son, was never going to be able to mould into what the church thought the minister's children should be like. And I'm a minister's daughter, my husband's a minister's son, so there's certain expectations that we had ourselves, but it's safe to say that none of those expectations have ever been reached. So I'll try to remember my little things to tell you because I can't see them up there, but there was just, what there should have been there was little icons that would remind me of little stories to tell you about our children in church and what our church had to learn. So there was a football. We had a visiting minister that came along one time, and my husband must have been away, and I was at church on my own with the children. which, as Emma said, is a really stressful experience when you've got them. We used to have a childcare, our creche area was at the front of our church, so everybody could see. So anyway, this visiting minister brought along a football and put it under the communion table after he'd finished using it as an illustration, and my son thought, I'm having that. So my son starts playing, he's like 3 or 4, starts playing football, going up and down the aisles. And aisles are great, especially if you're in a church that has kneelers, because kneelers, you can lie on the top of them, you can slide up and down underneath the pews, and that's really great fun as well. Then there was the time that the church wasn't able to sing any hymns that had more than one number 5 in the hymn book, because my son had eaten the spare number 5 that goes on the hymn board. He was a very sensitive boy, everything went in the mouth. But yeah, he got hold of the number 5 and he ate it. So we had to, I can't remember what 550 was, but it was one we used to sing. But yeah, that was a bit of a problem. My daughter decided that her daddy just preaches for far too long. So she just walked up to him and handed him a dummy. And when he refused to take the dummy, because he was a new minister at the time, trying to play it cool, she just put the dummy in his pocket and walked away, and was hoping that he would kind of get the hint. And our church family very much embraced our children, and they were also very good at just being that extra pair of eyes in church as well, because I don't know if you know Ballantrae Church, you go out the front door, you're straight onto the main road, onto the A77, and that would always fear, I was full of fear every Sunday morning that my boy would run out of the door and end up on the road. So one day we tied a balloon to him round his wrist, and a helium balloon. I can't remember why we had helium balloons in the church, but we did. And we could not find him anywhere. We had the whole church searching for this boy. Like, how can we lose him? He's got a helium balloon around his wrist. Eventually, somebody in the congregation found him. He was in the pulpit, sitting down with the helium balloon. But it was just, the church were just amazing, just being that extra pair of eyes for us and not interfering or bringing us any stress. Well, actually, to be fair, they did bring us a lot of stress at times. They didn't, but generally the majority of the congregation were very embracing towards our children. So I guess my kind of final message I want to leave with you is that children, adopted children, when they come into a church, they're not going to conform, they're not going to maybe behave the way that other children would, and they're not going to change. And Ballantrae Church learned very quickly that the church needs to change to accommodate those children. And it was a slog, it was difficult at times, but they got there in the end. And our children love going to church. They don't participate in the way you would expect them to. I mean, they're 14 and 16 now. They won't stand up for the hymns. They'll both sit there and do colouring or drawing in the pew. But the thing they do absolutely love is going for a cup of tea after the service, because we don't drink tea or coffee at home. It's the only place to get a cup of tea, and it's the church that have taught them to be tea drinkers. So they get their cup of tea and they like a wee chat with people, and they miss people if they're not there. So very much the church has embraced our children. They feel very much part of that community, and that's just really means so much to us. So I know we had this verse earlier, but pure and genuine religion in the sight of God the Father means caring for the orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you. This is a verse that Home for Good use a lot. And it's one that I just think it's really good for me to finish on. And what I just really want to say is one thing you can do as a church is love. Love these children when they come. We're told as adopters, don't think love them and everything will be okay. It needs a lot more to do that. The parents do that, but you as a church can love. And that's what I would like to leave you with today. So thanks very much. And if you do have any questions, I've got fact sheets of FASD which I'm happy to give away to people. And thank you very much for your interest.